Now let's tackle making fingers for the hand. So first of all, since I'm going to be making bones, I need to select the bone layer so that I can make sure that I'm actually working in the bone layer again. So I'm going to go up to the bone tools. Now I'm using the front viewport because we want the bones to be perfectly straight when looking from the top viewport, just because you don't want the fingers to be bending in a strange direction. So let's turn the bone tools on, go to create bones, and it doesn't really matter where you position it from here because we're going to adjust those in a second anyway. All right, so I've created the bones. It doesn't matter if it's perfectly straight because they're going to be bending inward anyway. So I'm going to set this off to the side so I can kind of turn around here. Now, whenever you move these, you want to only select the bottom joint and to get them into position. And keep in mind that these bones are where things are going to be bending. So I'm going to turn off angle snaps just so that I can make sure that this is going the right direction. Let's rotate around. Let's get this lined up the best we can. Get a good first representation as far as the bones are concerned. Okay, if you turn on bone edit mode, you can actually move things out. So want that the bone end to actually be beyond the tip of the finger. And you also want the bones to be, turn off bone edit mode, you definitely want it to be centered in on the mesh. Now if you are going to rotate it, because let's say that you want the finger to be perfectly straight with the hand, you can rotate the base bone, but don't rotate the other ones. So if I wanted to bend that one a little bit, that'll make it so that when it rotates, it'll rotate along that, around that Z-axis right there. Okay, bone edit mode. Let's see here, we want the first knuckle to be right there. So I'm going to go to the move tool. Notice I'm doing this in the local viewport, in local mode up here for the coordinate system. That way the bones actually extend straight in the direction they're already pointing. Let's have the first knuckle end right around there at that line. Okay, so the bones for the index finger are complete. Now just to save myself a little bit of time, I'll turn off bone edit mode and let's go ahead and rename these. So this is going to be BN underscore index 001. Now this is where that 001, 002 naming convention is really going to come into play, because we are going to name this one BN index 002. Oh wait, I almost forgot. We need to put which hand it's on. So this is going to be L. Three, and then the final one is going to be the bone end. Now it's important that you actually name these bone ends, because when you skin your alien later on, the bone ends are not going to be included in the skinning, and you need a quick and easy way to be able to isolate those so you don't include it. Okay, so now we need to have 1, 2, and 3 more. So I'm going to do shift, drag, oops, cancel. We actually need to double click on this first joint. Shift and drag. I'm going to make 3 more. I'm going to move this over to where the thumb is going to be. Now, if we take a look at the way that your thumb bends, it actually bends. There's a bone that kind of starts back here in your palm, and that bone just kind of rotates around and allows you to change the angle of your thumb. And so I'm going to position that in that location. So it's going to be turning, say, around this direction. Definitely want to make sure that we're putting it where it needs to be. Yes, you may. Let's turn on some bone edit mode here. I'm going to just move that back a little. Let's move this forward to where that first joint is going to be located. Don't move it side to side because you don't want it to be, it's going to look really strange if you don't want to bend it to bend in kind of like a strange direction. Let's rotate it around. Yeah, we definitely need to turn this up this direction. Does it need to go down a little? No, I think that's good for that one. Now this one you can actually rotate a little bit because this is going to, this is where the thumb is going to actually bend in towards the palm. But you want to make sure that those bones are centered as much as possible. Because that's going to determine basically how the skin is going to move. All right, so I think that one looks good. Wait a minute. No, it doesn't. I forgot. I need to actually move the bone end beyond the thumb. Something you have to remember, because the bone ends are actually not a part of the bone, it's just something that allows you to adjust these edges. Okay, so that's where that knuckle is going to be. Okay, repositioning these fingers is going to be, it's going to be relatively similar to how we did this one right here. And we also need to go back and we need to change the names of the bones here for the thumb. So I'm going to go ahead and set that stuff up. I'm going to pause in the meantime, and then also, oh, before I forget, so one other thing that I want to show you to do is make sure that you do that we color this so that way it matches the other left side stuff that we've created. I'm going to apply a gradient. I'm going to do that to the others as well. Okay, so now everything has been properly named, and I've also repositioned everything, and you really want to make sure that those bones are as centered in those fingers as possible. If something needs to be adjusted a little bit, then make sure that you make those adjustments now, because it's going to be a lot easier to do it now than it is later on. So for example, this one right here, I might be able to move that down. I don't know, let me look. Actually, maybe this needs to move in. So remember, you got to turn bone edit mode off, or else it's just going to move that joint along. Okay, just angle it and make sure that's centered on the thumb. Okay, so now the next thing that I need to do is I need to copy this whole thing over to the right side. So actually I'm going to go ahead and just grab the select object tool. That way I don't accidentally move anything. Hold down Control. Now you'll notice that if I try to copy it over to the right side while I'm in the local coordinate system, I go to the front viewport, it's going to reflect it in kind of a weird direction that we don't really want. So you actually want to change this to view. Now let's try to reflect it here. Okay, so it is reflecting them separately, but that's perfectly fine. Here, just a minute. You zoom out. Also, something else that you want to do is make sure you turn off mirror IK limits, because we don't really need to carry anything over other than just each of these fingers. So I'm going to offset it. And if you recall, when I made the mesh of the hand, I had to do a little bit of some custom resizing because I didn't like the size of it. So I'm actually going to have to move these bones around to make sure that they are in the right position before I continue. So I'm going to go ahead and pause it, and then I'll resume after that's done. Also, don't forget that you're going to have to change the gradient and also change the names up here. So now the finger joints are all in the correct positions. You need to again make sure that they are centered in the fingers. That looks like it might be a little high. So don't be afraid to come in here and rotate things a little, because you really want them to be lined up with the fingers as much as possible. That's going to make the skinning so much easier later on. And the skinning can be extremely daunting if you haven't set this up right. So please be very, very careful with that. But once everything looks good and it's in a good position, and it looks like these fingers, if they were to rotate forward, that should make sense. I might just turn that one ever so slightly. Now we can actually start, let's make a control point for each of these IK chains that we have. That process is going to be just like it was before. Just going to have a point here. It's already green, perfect. And then I'm going to go Alt-A. And actually make sure the orientation and position is aligned with that bone. And now we're going to make it so that this IK chain follows this point when we move it. And we want the hand to actually have an orientation constraint to that point. If you did this correctly, it shouldn't move anything around. However, if I were to grab this now, it actually will, it'll move things. Yep, and that's exactly what we want. Now notice the fingers didn't move with it, and there's actually a really good reason for that. That's because we actually need to link all of these fingers to the hand. So you're just going to select the base finger of each one, of each joint, go over to link, we'll link it to the hand bone. Okay, now if I grab this, if I move it, see now the hand moves with it because of the orientation constraint. And if I lift it, it's going to lift the whole hand. Now you need to do the same thing to the other hand. Just don't forget to rename your control point. And also, I made a mistake. I shouldn't be in the bone layer when I'm creating this thing, so actually I need to move this down to helpers. So I need to be in the helpers layer. And I'm just going to start off by copying that. And we are going to call this hand 001. Okay, so after linking all of the finger joints in the left hand and also setting the orientation constraint for the new control point and linking the IK chain to the control point, now I'm ready to continue. And just to test it, yep, that works. So now we are going to create control objects for each of the fingers. To do this, I'm going to go into the top viewport. I don't really need the bone tools anymore for this. We're going to go into splines, and actually I'm going to create a rectangle. So I'm going to change the size of this rectangle, and I'm also going to make it blue because we don't really, let's change the thickness. And because I remembered, we're also going to change this and name it CC underscore left underscore. And I'll call this index 001. Now we're going to need to have a different one for each of the hands. Also, let's go ahead and let's drag this up so that it's closer to the hand. So we're going to need to have one for the pinky, the middle, the index, and the thumb. So that's 1, 2, 3 more. Hit Shift. Okay, this one I'm going to name it middle 001. This one we're going to call pinky 001. And this one is going to be thumb 001. And since we are going to need to have these also for the other hand, I'm just going to copy it. Let's make another copy here. I'm going to put R here, so that way I don't have to retype R for each one. I'm going to drag that over to the other side. Let's go ahead and fix the names just so that so we have a 1 here. That's going to be green. One here, that one's going to be green. Just do that for the others. Oh, well, I guess I am going to have to change our thumb, but that's fine. Minor inconvenience. Okay, so now this index one, I'm going to align it with this joint right here. Completely align it, orientation and position. We're going to do that with the others. And with the thumb. Okay, so now conveniently this actually, it made it already vertical just because of the local axes for those particular, for those rectangles that I created. However, I also want them to rotate. So I'm going to rotate them just 45 degrees. If I grab all of them, just we rotate up. Let's see, 45 degrees, perfect. And now we're going to lift them just above the hand. So looks like that's in local, that's fine. So you just want them to be above the knuckles. You know, and then we can kind of adjust things individually. You know what, I totally just messed that up already. There's something that you need to do before you move these above the hand. And before you rotate them. Okay, so you want these to have the same local orientation as the knuckles. Okay, since we want each of these rectangles to have the same local orientation as the knuckles, we are going to come over here to the Hierarchy tab, select IK, actually not IK, Pivot. We're going to do Effect Object Only. So this way, all of the orientation of each of these controllers is going to stay the same as the knuckle, and it's very important that that remains the case. So now we're going to come over here into the rotate tab. Just going to rotate it exactly 45 degrees. I turned on angle snaps for that. And now we are going to move these controllers up so they are above the knuckles that they are going to control. You want it to be higher than the skin. And turn off Effect Object Only. Now you're going to do an orientation constraint of each of these to each of these controllers, of each of the base knuckles. So I'm going to come up here, orientation constraint. Actually, did I do that backwards? Nope, I didn't for that one. Good. Now if we take this and we turn it, it should actually move the finger. Now you'll notice that I accidentally turned it a little bit there. There's an easy solution for that. If you come up here into the hierarchy tab and link info, we can actually freeze the rotation on the axes that you don't want. So right now we just want it to move along the z-axis. So I'm going to freeze the other two. So now the only option you have is to bend it this way. Now, technically, if you think of the way fingers work, sometimes they move closer together or further apart. So if you were to unfreeze something, you probably would unfreeze, I'd say, the y-axis, because then they can move that way. But for the sake of this assignment, I'm going to keep that frozen. And honestly, scale can be frozen for each of these because in every aspect, because you're not going to really be scaling these at all. Okay, once you've created that, now, excuse me, we're going to create the hand controller. So I'm going to go into the top viewport. We're going to, actually, I'm going to create a line. And this is going to be very similar to what we did with the foot. I'm going to close that spline. Let's move that up towards the hand. And I'm going to turn it into an editable spline so that I can kind of adjust it into however I want to make it. So convert to editable spline. Let's go to vertex selection. Basically want it to just kind of outline the hand a little bit. The palm mostly. That's what I'm interested in here. This doesn't have to be super precise, but it does need to be functional and it needs to make sense. Okay, so let's grab the whole thing. Let's move it over a little bit. can actually put it under the palm. Okay, that'll work. Change its color to blue. Now I'm going to take this point and I'm going to actually link it to the hand controller so that that moves with the hand. I'm also going to link each of these to that hand controller as well. And I'm going to link the elbow controller to the hand controller. Okay, so for the reason for that is that now, in order to actually move the hand, I can grab this, and it moves everything along with it, including the elbow controller. So now you will have to be repositioning this thing, if you're trying to repose, the arm. But this does allow everything to kind of move together a little bit, as you can see. Okay, now the last thing that we have to do is that we are going to actually create our attribute holder, but now for the fingers and the thumb. So each of these is going to bend that first joint. However, our attribute holder needs to be in the hand controller. So I'm going to go ahead and find it. We're going to add that attribute holder to it. Now if we go into animation, parameter editor, and we are going to, first of all, from 0 to 100 is fine. Remember that that actually having at 0 means that the finger isn't going to be able to bend backwards, which is fine. So we don't want to put the negative value in there. And let's have it as a float. Remember to deselect, add preset options. And we actually don't need to create anything for the first knuckle because that's actually going to be controlled by these things right here, by those control objects. So let's start off with the thumb 002. Let's go ahead and add it. And then thumb 003. Index 002. Index 003. Middle 002. You get the idea? Okay. Pinky 002. And that should be good for our parameters. Make sure that you save. The last time that I tried this, it actually crashed before I was able to do what I'm trying to do next. So if I go into the front viewport, and actually before I've linked anything to this, because if you recall, I linked the hand controller so that it would control everything else. But I actually want to unlink it here really quickly. So let's just select everything and unlink. So now if I move this, it should move alone. And the reason that I wanted to do that is because I want to actually mirror it over to the other side. Let's put that back into layer mode. Let's go ahead and hit F. And now we're going to mirror this with our attribute holder in place. We need to have a copy. Deselect the mirror IK limits. And make sure you're also in view, not in local. I'm just going to move this over to generally underneath that hand. Hit OK. change the color. Also, I probably should have given it a name before I did that. But this is going to be cc underscore left underscore hand and this is going to be cc underscore right underscore hand. Okay, so now let's just adjust that position, make sure that everything looks good. Actually, it's not too bad. And before I link everything again, actually I want to move the pivot point just to make it so that it moves smoothly with everything else. Just going to go Effect Pivot Only. I'm going to do Alt A. I'm going to make it so that it actually is aligned with that point. I'll do the same thing over here. Okay, now I can relink everything. Turn Effect Pivot Only off. Each of these knuckles, knuckle controllers, and that point are going to be linked to the hand controller. And it should work without any issues. And let's go ahead and link this back to the hand controller too. Okay, you're going to do the same thing to the right side, and then we are going to wire these finger joints so that you can use the attribute holder in here in order to control the fingers. To wire each of these finger joints, we're going to do it the same way that we did the foot. So I'm going to right click on this over here, go to Wire Parameters, Transform Rotation. Now we need to also pay attention to the rotation that we need to transform it on. So specifically, we need to be in the local, and it looks like it's going to be rotating along the z-axis. So move bone tools. Okay, bone edit mode's not on. Good. Okay, so it should be rotating along the z-axis up. You know what? I actually messed up on something. Remember how I unlinked everything? Well, it literally unlinked everything. So I probably need to come back in here and I need to link things back up in the direction that they're supposed to go. So this hand is supposed to be linked up to that one. It goes to that hand. Actually, this needs to go to this. Anytime that you create a link, it breaks any other link that you have in place, so you don't have to worry about linking the wrong thing, because all you have to do is just link it the right way and then you're good to go. That's why that joint moved and the other joints didn't follow. Okay, so I'm just going to test it just to make sure that okay, so that works. That works. Yep. Okay, and let's go ahead and just lift this and make sure that that is working correctly as well too. Okay, so it is not. That means that I forgot to link that IK chain back in. Okay, and so let's see if that does it. Okay, so the IK chain is linked in. Let's see here. So if I lift the hand, okay, so it's the hand that isn't moving. I wonder if it broke the orientation constraint. No, didn't break the orientation constraint. That seems to work. That seems to work. Except, let's see here. Because that just moves all the control points. I think the IK chain is broken, which actually is fine. Just delete it. I'll just create a new one. And then I just have to make sure that I link that chain to this point. Yeah, that works again. Okay, excellent. So we're back in business. All right, so let's work on these wire parameters. So this joint right here should have a wire parameter connected to that one, so that's going to be index. So go down here, wire parameters, transform, rotation, and it was, I believe, along the z-axis. Wait, actually, that's not the one I want. I want the second one. Okay, so now we're ready to connect these wires for the parameters that we created in our parameter, in our attribute holder. So I'm going to start with index 2, because remember this is actually being controlled by this one. We don't need to wire anything to that. So I'm going to right click on this, go to wire parameters, transform, rotation, and let's go Z rotation, modified object, attribute holder, custom attributes, and we're going to start this one off with index 02. Going to connect it. Okay, so let's test it. Let's see if that works. Yep, it is moving in the direction I want to. So now you're going to do that with index 03, middle, pinky, and the thumb. Okay, one last thing that I did after I had finished wiring all of the finger controllers is I went in and went to Effect Object Only under the Hierarchy tab for this one, right here. And I rotated it so that it would be 90 degrees. The reason I did that is because if you are going to be moving the thumb, it makes a lot more sense for it to move this direction. That way, when you're bending the thumb inwards, you can actually change the angle and the direction that the thumb is actually going to go in at. So now if you test it out, you should be able to grab your controller. If I go over to thumb, here I can change that. Actually, let's go ahead and let's test that out to show kind of how it works. Okay, so you see you can make your thumb kind of move inward. Each of the joints moves in a way that makes sense. Got our index. Oh, looks like index 3 isn't working. So that's why it's important that you actually come back in here and test things. So if index 3 isn't working, then that means I need to come in here, go to the wire parameters, transform, rotation, Z rotation, modified object, and index 3. I'm going to connect it. So now if I come in here, it looks like index 3 moves as I would expect it to. That's good. We got our middle, and we've also got the pinky. And if you wanted to rotate these, just have the rotate tool. And I also recommend going into the link info. In this case, we don't want it to rotate around anything but the z-axis. So now that is going to lock us into just that one. See in that one, I might turn it in the direction I don't want it to. And finally, looks like this one already is locked in. Okay, so looks like everything is wired correctly in the hand. Let's go ahead and lift this up and see if the attribute holder works. Okay, so it looks like this finger is not linked in, so I need to make sure that I come over here and link that to the hand. Okay, so let's lift this again. Okay, everything is moving along with it. That's good. Let's go ahead and rotate it. Okay, everything is rotating. That's good too. Let's move the arm. Okay, so it looks like everything is working as it's supposed to. So just make sure that you've tested everything and that everything is moving correctly. And make sure that the right side is also working the same way. So that concludes the hand section. In the next section, I'll show you how to finish up the eye.